2, miscellaneous offenses, amending section 2 to provide that upon application to the village, a property owner shall be authorized to occupy as a temporary residence a travel trailer, camping trailer, fifth wheel trailer, motor home, or residential vehicle. Oh, did I say that? I'm tired. Recreational vehicle for up to 180 days during the construction of renovation of a residence upon which continuous progress is underway, providing for limited extensions and related matters.
Any discussion?
My question is why we need this.
I second that.
I can explain why you need the amendment. It's up to the board to determine why you need the ordinance as a whole. The amendment is offered, or I should say was requested of me because of concerns that if someone was building, that they didn't have any options for where to live during their construction process. And it was suggested that this option should be available, and that's why you need the amendment if in fact you want this exception or this option.
And my question was more about the ordinance itself, that, you know, as part of what's being amended.
I think a lot of it came because there were some places that were putting up lean-tos and just camper trailers on it to live in permanently. And we said that trailers had to be on kind of a permanent foundation, more or less.
Can you be more specific?
No, because I barely remember doing the ordinance.
Okay, case in point, I lived in my 35-foot fifth wheel every summer till it froze so cold I couldn't stay there anymore. I wasn't doing, of course I was always doing maintenance on my house, but I chose to live there because I wanted to live over on the property before I bought the house across the street from that. I would be in violation of that. I wouldn't have been able to live on my own trailer on my own property.
And this is why this is coming into effect, is so that you can do that. Yeah.
For 180 days, while there's progress going on somewhere else. I chose to live there because I wanted to live out of the city, over in the back. It was because I wanted to live there, regardless of what reason.
Place also.
His is grandfathered in.
But you would prevent him in the future from coming here.
Correct. Our ordinance would.
Yes, this one.
And does this ordinance, is he still grandfathered in under this ordinance?
Yes, yes. Mr. Worley.
Oh, my.
Chief. Warren.
What if it's a summer home, like Marianne's talking about? They could be there for 180 days and then they have to leave?
On your own property and your own?
With as long as there's progress, providing for limited extensions and related matters. So if you want to live longer than 180 days in your camper, come to the board and say, hey, this is what's going on.
But why would I have to ask the board?
Only in the case of construction. It's not being an exception made to live in it.
Live in it.
As
You're
in
doing something
general.
that need to live in it to begin with.
Is the one where the people are living in it for the winter, is that one have sewer and water connections?
I don't know that anybody is going to continue to live in it during the winter because the people that do have that aren't employed here anymore or have any reason to live here during the winter. But it does have water, I know.
It's got water
And sewer both.
Oh, okay.
And so-
It's still.
Well, and I guess it gets tangled up for me, this one, with our factory-built homes ordinances, which say, you know, we're not going to have any pre-1976 mobile homes in the village henceforth. And those that we do have, mobile homes, have to be anchored and tied downs and so forth if they're not attached to a permanent foundation. Are pre-76, does that mean what I would call a single wide? Are there single wides after 76?
There are single wides after 76, but the 1976 was the time at which new standards came into place. And that's where the 1976.
But our ordinances do not permit new single wides to
Your
go in.
ordinance
Are you guys going to have to move? Or are you grandfathered?
Probably not for this ordinance.
Under the order.
I thought they were prohibited.
No.
You do have to move?
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
what
not
you
sure
read.
if we're grandfathered in or not.
They would be permitted as long as they were tied down or put on a foundation.
And were built after 76.
And built after
Their own
76.
safety.
And they also have to be 20 feet away from the lot boundary,
Yeah.
which with the lots in this town is an impossible thing to do.
They have to be 20 feet away from the front of it.
My lots are only 20, I have like 3 lots, they're only like 20 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
How can I be 20 feet away from a lot boundary if my lot's only 20 feet?
Which is the reason why these always need to be amended and fixed. as
Well,
needed.
yes, it really just depends on what you want. If, and in fact, we're getting pretty far afield in the factory-built homes one. But it is up to, as representatives of this community, it's up to you to use your best judgment about what's best for this community. And it's up to the people to decide who they elect and to continue to have their say, so that if there are issues that can be raised or that are raised that in your best judgment you feel need attention, then you respond to them. If there, one of the first things I learned in the first elected office I served in was that you can't please everyone. That as soon as you take an action and there's an objection to that action and you change the action, then there'll be somebody coming along saying something different. You have to use your very best judgment and try to listen to everybody and think, and determine what you really want. So
Honestly,
with regard
when we
to,
started these and nobody was around to protest or anything, we thought we were doing what was best for the
well,
village.
and I understand that. Yes, you did. And in your best judgment, you were doing what was best for the village. And much of what you did, I think you'll find still is, that you will still feel that way. Part of what you did, I know you did, because there were complaints to you at those prior times, because you talked about those complaints in that early stage. But you need to use your best judgment to determine that as to whether what you have is what you still believe is in the best interest of the village. And if you do, then you should stick with it. If you think there should be exceptions, then you should proceed with them. If you think there should be changes, then you should make them. But just be aware that you can't please everyone.
So would you tell me what the or else is? So they don't apply, if it's the new language here, if they don't apply for a application of the village to occupy one of these temporary residences, they don't do that, then what's their,
And they live in it anyway,
Uh-huh.
is what you're saying, then it would be in violation of the ordinance, and the ordinance process would come into play.
and the fee, fine, penalty is what?
As it's the same as any other ordinance violation, it's in the discretion of the judge. And if they choose to not comply with the ordinance, even after they're asked to comply, then you go through that process. And what's before you tonight is whether to pass this exception, to authorize it. It is not before you whether or not to continue the ordinance. If you choose to have a change of that nature made, then you need to give me different instructions than you've given me at this point. But at this point, the instructions that I had were to draft an exception with these basic parameters, which is what is before you.
My recollection is that we talked about how are people going to know this. And I know one of the suggestions made, which I think is a good one, is that when people if they go to realtors and we provide our information about what the requirements are to have a residence in Jameson, then that would be a way for people who go to realtors who look at property here would know that. This may be someone who's not going to a realtor. They already have a lot. They've decided they're going to retire and bring their fifth wheeler here and box it all in and build a frame around it or put it in a metal, whatever they're going to do. And there's no way to communicate that, I guess, is one of the things. And we talk about we've got to be even-handed and fair and treat everybody the same way, which I agree with. But if we're treating people the same by having them not know what the requirements are, that doesn't feel right to me.
One of the things that is done in several communities is, and of course it's true, that if someone makes a purchase that you didn't even know they were making it, they don't make contact with anyone, then and they don't themselves, make a request to know what your ordinances are and stuff. That is true in every case in every community where somebody moves in where there's no previous contact. But what some of the communities have done is initiated a packet of information that's provided to each new resident as soon as you become aware of it.
Welcome wagon.
Yeah, a welcome wagon, so to speak. Usually it contains some other things too, But I don't know of any way to make people aware of what any of your ordinances are until you know they exist.
But I think we have a situation right now where a family has purchased Jimmy Gray's trailer, and their plan, as I understand it, I haven't talked with them, but it's my understanding, was to put an additional place for people to live in, and not necessarily a single wide or manufactured housing, but a motor home or something. Of course, we had tons of motor homes over here across that we just got rid of. So there's somebody that's made a commitment not knowing whether that's permissible or not.
That would have been me 20 years ago, too.
And so I guess the question is, do we think that it's important that, and you say that, we're just talking about the amendment. Well, that's a slippery slope because, yeah, we're just doing this, but it's attached to something else that we haven't, in my opinion, I haven't had the discussion of the why. As you said, you worked on it for years, and I wasn't even retired and driving from St. Joe here to a lot of those meetings, I'm sure much to your chagrin. But so, and I've been here longer than these two, and I don't know when Letha was then. I know John, or what's his name, Corner, James was here then. But so I think if we just keep amending what we've always done without discussion, and probably the only one that needs that, I'm fine to be hushed up and go on. So.
Well, don't misunderstand what I said about that. What I said is that you can't take action on that.
I understand.
Because that was not posted.
I understand.
You can raise the question, and you can give instruction that you want something prepared for a future agenda.
So,
you can't legally take action.
Right, I understand that.
so Beth would in turn say, do we actually need this ordinance? And then she could put that before the board. Do we actually want that ordinances?
That's right up there. You want to
So
write
my
up.
question is, if you didn't have this ordinance and then people just started pulling trailers in and parking them,
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the spirit of the ordinance is
That's what it's for now.
to prevent it from Jameson being an RV park. And ignorance of the ordinance does not, ignorance of an ordinance of law or anything, there's not an exemption.
And what?
If you buy property and,
You need to find out.
yes, exactly, you need to find out what you find out from whenever you're hooking up the water or what the ordinances and things are when you're moving something new in. I remember.
that to me would be the place where people would find out. I need water hooked up and
Right, the first
contact.
Beth, are you asking the why for the ordinance or the why for the amendment?
I'm asking the why for the ordinance.
And I second that.
Because what's the principle? Is it because we think it looks bad, that it's trashy? Is it unsafe? Or is it because poor people live there? I mean, what are we after here? Why are we saying this?
Because we don't live in.
mobile homes, if they catch on fire, burn immediately. There's no help at all.
Comes, they go.
Tornado, they're gone. And we were trying to prevent that being here. That's why we say they have to be anchored down and tied down and everything.
But that's not your job to.
Said I don't want to be an RV park.
It's I don't know if you've seen some of the shows on TV, but there's a big movement right now of people living in tiny houses, trailers, because because of the economy. People just can't afford to necessarily go into debt.
If they come in and build a little house, it's gonna be similar something.
So, no, but a lot of the tiny houses are on trailers to apply with the codes in other areas because
Right.
they can't be affixed.
That's
I know
exactly what
you're
mine's
talking about
doing.
there, but those can't say they can't be parked. I got a huge lot. They can't. I mean, I live in a trailer. I can't build a tiny house on my property, not have it anchored down, just have it just parked there and hooked up. Some places you can. Some places there's an exemption to that because it's on wheels.
And Jameson's like a town of like 130 people. I mean, do we
No, they
really need
move.
these ordinances that the big cities have to prevent people from coming in with trailers like that?
How
Well,
many?
I'm from Albany originally. I remember back in the 70s, Albany wasn't that big when they put this same thing in place. And I remember it well because there was trailers next to my parents' house on one side, single wide trailers, at least 3 of them, that
What do you think?
once those were vacated, they couldn't put another trailer there. And as the town grew, 30 years later, that's all single-family homes that have been built up.
We can ask the board, do you have any discussion, any preference on this? Let's move this along. I have cooking to do in the morning.
I agree. You want a second reading?
Do we want a second reading?
I say yes.
Table it, what do you want to do?
I'd say second reading.
All right, Bill
Second reading.
2014-15, amending and retitling ordinance 2012-02, miscellaneous offenses, amending section 2 to provide that upon application to the village, a property owner shall be authorized to occupy as temporary residence a travel trailer, camping trailer, fifth wheel trailer, motor home, or recreational vehicle for up to 80 days 180 days during the construction and renovation of a residence upon which continuous progress is underway, providing for limited extensions and related matters.
I make a motion that we accept bill number 2014-15.
That's what we have. There's a motion and a second.
She says, I'm gonna go home and go to
I
bed.
have a second. Oh, you need a second.
Everybody else agrees.
All right. 16. Patty? Yay. Natalie? Yay. Aletha?
Yay.
Danielle?
Yay.
Beth?
No.
David?
Yay.
Okay. Motion passed 4-1.
We need some new town trustees. We can't trust these people.
All right.
Well, that was really quite minor.
First reading. First reading of Bill 2014-16.
This is the tricky one. This is the
Stop. You need to be quiet. Thank you, dear. Amending section 15, 21.1-3 and 22 of ordinance 2011-03, general provisions to clarify warnings and the requirement for a written warning and abatement order prior to the issuance of a notice of violation, to specify that board approval is required before a violation notice is prepared and served, and related matters.
I can't see where the difference is.
And this is an attempt to make more clear that, where these warnings and such come into play. And you have in section 15, which was titled warnings, now titled prior warnings, and making it clear that that these warnings refer to a verbal or written warning prior to the issuance of a written warning and abatement order. And they are not mandatory. The section 21 is now titled Written Warning, Abatement Order, and Procedure, and contains within it, under number 1, a statement that such written warning and abatement order shall be issued prior to the issuance of a violation notice, and there shall be no penalty for the specified violation when the abatement is completed within the time stated therein. And then it goes on to say what the warning and abatement order has to include, which is the same as it was before. In my view, this does not change the process, but our attempt was to make it more clear and to make it a more upfront statement that there's no penalty attached if that violation or when that violation is completed within the time stated. That's what makes it a warning instead of a violation notice, is that there's a time period given and no penalty attaches if the correction is made. Now, we left in it the understanding that you're not ordering your officer or whoever you designate to deal with this. You're not ordering them to proceed with a formal process if progress is taking place without a formal process. When it reaches the point where it is not seen that reasonable progress is taking place, then you can proceed with it. And then but we wanted to make clear, as was always intended, that you cannot proceed to a violation notice, which is your very formal, this is summons to court, essentially. You cannot proceed with that on the kind of and keep in mind that here we're dealing with violations suitable for abatement. In this type of situation, you cannot proceed with a violation notice if you have not previously given that time period and opportunity to correct it without penalty. That's what the goal was. There is a second portion, and that was what was primarily discussed by Brent and others, I think, as well as Deanne Fisher in her letter was inquiring about that. There was a second issue that was brought up, which is you'll find in section 21, number 2, in the bold, and that was having board approval prior to preparing those violation notices. It's on the back if you didn't find it. And then in section 22, it's the same issue, but there were just 2 places where it needed to be stated.
So this is what
So it's taken care of.
I'm sorry.
Well,
Well, that's the intent. It's up to you to judge whether you think it really is. But the intent is to make it clear so that both the board, any officer the board may designate, and hopefully the community will understand that this kind of notice and the opportunity for correction without penalty is clear. As to whether the board chooses to place itself in the position of having to deal with every one of these situations, that's up to the board. I would state that it's my understanding that the board is requiring anyone that they would consider using for an ordinance enforcement officer to come to each meeting and to make a report of what they're doing, so that you should be informed throughout the process. I do need to make it clear again that there are some kinds of violations that are not suitable for abatement and that might require immediate action, such as the impounding of the dog.
it's already covered in the I have a question. Okay, it says a written warning, but from what Jen said, it was a verbal warning.
That's your prior warnings in section 15.
are we looking at C?
Section 15 doesn't have any Cs. Section 15 is.
No, I'm talking about C
That was
on
the
the
abatement.
agenda.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, on the
yes.
agenda.
1416 is the number of the bill, 2014-16.
Yes, okay, that
Okay,
says,
I see what you're
it
saying.
still says written. Where does it say a verbal?
That's just a summary of it.
Yeah, that's just a summary on
The
the
real
agenda.
bill is on
Yeah.
Yeah,
On the
that-
agenda.
You have a copy of the
That's
bill?
just the
Pardon?
title.
The bill?
I think, do you have a copy of the bill?
They have the one that
Yes.
they're
Okay,
sharing.
okay.
I'm looking at a copy of it.
Okay.
And I don't see where it says verbal.
Section 15, the second line, the fifth word in.
Give them
Whenever
verbal
a
regulation.
violation of any ordinance is
21.
deemed to exist, a designated officer of the village may give a verbal or written warning of such violation and the action necessary to correct any violation or abate any nuisance
I
prior to
think, I
the
think she's
Yeah.
down there. I think she's down there.
All right.
one very good sentence.
Now, as was mentioned, there is one aspect that many cities have chosen to use that is not a requirement, but many cities have chosen to use it as a general process. And that falls between those, which is an informal written request. Letter, basically, from the city. That would be up to the board whether you choose to.
Well, it says verbal or written, so.
Right, but I'm just saying that this is, it's up to the board to decide if they want to utilize a regular process as part of
But it
the
doesn't need to be
regular
written in.
process. But it's not in this. So if you decide to do that, then, you know, that's up to you.
Any comments, discussion?
Okay, I have another question. So you feel like this is an answer to the objection that, or the thing that Deanne wrote about? Deanne's question.
Do you feel like it is? I mean,
Yes.
that's probably more
Yes, I
important
do.
than you
Thank
guys
you.
know, yeah. Okay.
Yes,
I think it's clearing up
Yes.
and making
Yeah.
it a lot more.
Yeah, I have to admit that I think it's considerably better myself. We thought it was clear before, but when this many questions are raised, then it's obvious that it's not really clear. So, you know.
So shall we do a second reading?
Yes.
Yes.
Please.
You want to read? Bill 2014-16, amending sections 15, 21.1-3, and 22 of ordinance 2011-03, general provisions to clarify warnings and the requirement for written warning and abatement order prior to the issuance of a notice of violation, to specify that board approval is required before a violation notice is prepared and served, and other related items.
And related matters.
And matters.
Unrelated
Do I
matters.
have a motion?
I move the approval of Bill 2014-16.
I second.
Patty? Yay. Natalie?
Yay.
Aliva?
Yay.
No, yay, yay, yay? Jeff?
Yes.
David?
Yay.
Passed unanimously.
Yes.